Today's daf is Ayin Zayin. That's right, it's Oz. We're on Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph. 14 lines from the top. Amar Rabbah, and it should say Amar Rabbah Bar Ravuna, not Amar Rabbah Amar Ravuna, but Amar Rabbah Bar Ravuna, Amar Rav Nachman. Rava Bar Ravuna said in the name of Rav Nachman, Kotel sheben shtei chatzerot, tido echad gavoa 10 tefachim v'tido echad shaveh la'aretz, notnim oto lazeh shaveh la'aretz, mishum dahava lazeh tashmisho benachat, ve'lazeh tashmisho bekasheh. So what it says is that if you have we were talking yesterday about walls, right? And to whom is a wall attributed? In other words, if you have a wall in between two courtyards. So we talked yesterday about a wall as sort of a neutral zone or a nothing zone. But there could be cases in which the wall is actually considered part of one courtyard more than it's part of the other courtyard. And here that's what we're talking about, where the wall is situated in such a way that on one side it's 10 tefachim. But imagine that the two courtyards actually are not on the same level. One's ground level is higher than the other. One is elevated and one is lower. Just that's the way that the land happens to be. So if you're in one of the chatzerot, what will you have? A full 10 tefachim of, I didn't look at the picture yet, but a full 10 tefachim of wall. But if you're in the elevated one,
you're on the third floor. Then
you're going to see only, let's say, 8 or 9 tefachim of wall. Now, let's say the simplest. Now, literally, what it says is shaveh la'aretz, that the wall is flat with the ground, is even with the ground. But the way that the way that Rashi interprets that, and most of the Mefarshim interpret that, is she'eno amok mimena yud. In other words, that it's not 10 tefachim separate, or it's not, or that's talking about actually the deep. We're talking about the wall. I was reading the Rashi that talks about that. That talks about the next case. But Rashi says, "Klomar gavoahu min ha'achad v'namuchu lachaverta kegon shekarka'ita shel zo gavoa." So we're talking about elevated land in one of them. Kol kamat lo gavoa yud karei shaveh la'aretz. That's the point. That's the one I wanted to make. That Rashi says that when it says that the wall is flush with the ground of one of the courtyards, it doesn't mean literally that it's flush with the ground. It means that it's just less than 10 tefachim. It doesn't necessarily mean that the land of one courtyard is here and the land of one is here. It could be that they're closer together. The point is that from the perspective of one, you see 10 tefachim of wall, and from the perspective of the other, you see only 8 tefachim of wall, or anything from 0 to 9. So the point is that the one that has it within 10 tefachim, that's the courtyard that we're going to say this wall belongs to that courtyard. Because for that courtyard, it's tashmisho benachat. It's easier for them to use it than it is for the people who it's 10 tefachim. If it's 10 tefachim for you, it's high. If it's only 0 to 9 tefachim, it's more readily usable to those people. So and we say a general rule that anytime you have a wall that for one is easier than the other, we say that it belongs to the one who has an easier time accessing it. So therefore the courtyard that has an easier time accessing it is going to be the owner, so to speak, of that wall, and that means that the people in the other courtyard can't use the wall at all. They can't put stuff on the wall. It's considered part of the other wall.
Accessing it means using it like
let's say they would put stuff on it, they would sit on it, they would put stuff on it. Yeah.
But it's just ease of use. It's got nothing to do with the actual height from the ground to the top.
That's what makes it easier to use, that it's less tall.
I know that, but it's not a question of how it's defined in terms of its height.
If it were higher than 10 tefachim for everybody, it would just be a separation between the two courtyards, and it would belong to neither of them. That's what we said yesterday. Then it belongs to neither of them. It's just a partition. But once it's within, let's say, arm's level, basically, of one of the courtyards, you say, oh, that's like a ledge for me to put my arm on, when I'm sitting in my courtyard. But the guy next door, his ground is low, so he can't reach it. But it's within my reach, so it's really part of our courtyard. It's not part of their courtyard. That's the way that the Gemara is looking at it. Amar Rav Shizvi, Amar Rav Nachman, and Rav Shizvi reported in the name of Rav Nachman a similar halacha. Charitz sheben shtei chatzerot, tzido echad amok 10, tzido echad amok shaveh la'aretz, notnim oto lazeh shaveh la'aretz, mishum da'ava lazeh tashmisho benachat, lazeh tashmisho bekasheh. So it's the same exact idea, but this time with a pit. In other words, you have a pit in between. You have a hole in the ground, the Grand Canyon. Some kind of a hole in the ground between the two courtyards. So if on one side In other words, because of the way that the land is, one courtyard is situated in such a way that they see the entire 10 tefachim of this hole. Okay, and one courtyard, their ground is situated in such a way that they see only 0 to 9 tefachim. So therefore, the one that sees only 0 to 9 tefachim of a hole, that one is going to have an easier time, or it's going to be more readily useful for them than one who sees the entire 10 tefachim. So let's say, for example, in this case, the one who's higher is going to be at a disadvantage instead of an advantage. In the previous one, the one whose ground is higher is going to be at an advantage, because for the one who's higher, he's going to see less of the wall. But when it talks about a hole, if I'm standing, let's say, in an elevated position, the hole is here. So I'm going to see the entire 10 tefachim going down. But if I'm in a lower position, all I see is the bottom of the hole, the bottom of the opening. So to me, it's just, let's say, a small hole. So because I'm at a lower point. So for the people who are at a lower point, they are the ones who are going to have better access to that hole than the ones that are higher up, because they can't even reach the bottom, let's say, if they're higher up, because of the way that our courtyards are laying. So we need both cases. We need the case of the wall as well as the case of the pit. You need both cases, because we might say, we might say that, you know what, when it comes to a wall, people use a wall. So it makes sense to say that since the wall is within a reasonable height from the people in one courtyard, that we're considering it part of the courtyard. But a pit, people don't put stuff in the pit. Nobody's going to put stuff in a pit between two courtyards. So therefore the Gemara has to come to tell you, or Rav Nachman had to tell you, that even when it comes to a pit, we also say that pit is now an extension of the courtyard that has the easiest access to it, not the courtyard that has more difficult access.
This is a potential separator.
It's a separator. That's why
we're paying attention to it.
It is a separator. It's on the board. It's on the border between the two courtyards, and it's functioning as the separator.
So but
the question is, who do we actually give it to, so to speak?
Right.
Who does the separator belong to? So if it were equal on both sides, then it would just be a divider. It would belong to no one. Right? So and if he only told us about the case of the pit, you might say, well, that's because people are not afraid to use a pit. It's not precarious. You put something in a pit, it's at least safe. However, but when it comes to a wall, you might say, well, I don't want to put my stuff on a wall because it could fall off, the wind could blow, it's not as secure. So that's why Rav Nachman had to tell you that whether it's a pit or it's a wall, the one that has easier access, the courtyard that has greater access to it, or it's more readily accessible, that's the courtyard that possesses it. Now, let's say you are in a courtyard where it's even. You've got 10 tefachim on your side, 10 tefachim on the other side, but you say, you know what? I want to make this wall belong to my courtyard. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to elevate the ground in my courtyard, so that way I could say that we have easier access to this wall. And so it says, Im yesh b'miyuto arba'a mutar l'ishtamesh b'chol hakotel kulo. So what he says is, if it happens, in other words, what's the halakha generally about this kotel, about this wall, that they're not allowed to bring things up and down from the wall. Remember, the wall that's 10 tefachim, they could go up there and sit there and eat whatever's up there, but they can't bring anything from their courtyard to this wall. Right? According to Rabbi Yochanan, if it was a very thin wall, maybe, then you would be able to bring stuff up from both sides. But let's say it's not a very thin wall. Let's say it's a regular wall, standard wall, so it has the 4 tefachim of thickness. So if the person makes an elevation, so let's say they have the wall's right here, and this is the floor of the courtyard. Okay, they want to make an elevation right here so that there's a little platform so that they can more easily access the wall. And say, okay, this is our wall now. Now, if their platform is 4 tefachim long, so now we can say that is considered a platform to the entire wall, and they can use the entire wall. But if that platform is less than 4 tefachim long, so we say only the spot directly above that platform now belongs to the courtyard, but the rest of it is still neutral. It's not looked at as a doorway to the entire wall. And then the Gemara asks, but wait a second here. Ma nafshach? Ahane miuta b'kulei kotel lishtamesh. If you're telling me that this platform actually helps the courtyard to be considered closer to the wall, more possessive of the wall, So what difference does it make? What does it mean that I can only use the part that's right in front of me? I mean, it's all or nothing. Either this platform is giving us greater access to the top of the wall, and therefore the wall belongs to us, or this platform doesn't give us greater access. Why would you say only right in front of the platform? Can't you walk around the top of the wall once you put the platform? You should be able to. So what's going on here? Manavshach means, what are you thinking? Either way.
Either way.
It's a way. It's a figure of speech. It's an idiom. Literally, it means, what is your soul? Manavshach, what are you thinking? Meaning that you're not really solving the problem that you're trying to solve, because either way, it turns out that it doesn't work. Now, okay. So what happens here is, so let's see if we have the picture.
So in other words, they're not talking about
They don't have
the
pictures.
actual platform being useful. They're just talking as the platform being something that gives you access.
It gives you greater access to the top.
To the rest of the wall. And everybody agrees with that.
Right, but the question is, why should it make a difference how long it is? I mean, it gets you up there.
If it's giving you access.
Right, it gives you access, so what difference should it make, right?
The only time where it would not be, then that would make sense, is that you're actually using the actual platform.
Right.
And that's what they're talking about.
No, they're talking about getting up
They're
there.
talking about using it to get
To the wall. No, to get to the wall, right. So now the Gemara says, okay. So we'll answer this. So Amar Ravina says that Kegon she'akar chulya merosho. We're not talking about where you made a platform at the bottom. Because we said, Bali ma'ato, you want to lower it? So he says, it's not that you're lowering it by putting a platform on the ground. It's that you're lowering it, meaning that you took something off the top, but only on your half of the wall. Okay? It's a thick enough wall that you diminished your half of the wall, because if you diminished both sides, then it'll be equal for both sides, right? So it shows it here as if it's going all the way through, but really it would have to not be that way, because
What is that number?
that's number 251. It can't really be that way, the Mefarshim say, because if you did that, then it would be equal on both sides. So what it means is, like Rashi says, I believe, I think it's Rashi that explains it here. He says that it's only on one side.
which would be possible in a 4 tefach thick wall, but
right. So we're talking about a thick wall. So in a thick wall, you took just on your side,
right.
you lowered it to 9,
yeah.
let's say, and you made a length that was 4 tefachim, that was lower than 9, that was lower than 10 tefachim, but a length of 4 tefachim. That's what it's talking about. Now we say, okay, if you did that, now the whole wall is considered to be in your reach and belong to you. Now it makes sense. In other words, if it's about the platform, what does it matter? You have a little stepping stool, so you could come up from anywhere. Why should the platform have to be a certain length? But if you're talking about actually taking something off of the wall to change the status of the wall relative to that chatzer, so then you would have to take off a certain you can't just take in one spot, you made it lower than 10 tefachim. It has to be 4 tefachim of length. You have to take it. No, not necessarily, because you might say that only where you diminished it is it good, but the parts that are still 10 tefachim you can't use.
The issue is, can the other ones, the ones on the other side of the wall use it? That's
not the issue. The issue is they're saying if the chidush here is that if one side, if the people living in one chatzer lower just 4, you take a 4 tefach length. Wait.
Only this or there's
4 tefach length spot on their side that they diminished it to 9 tefachim, but the rest of it is all 10 tefachim in height.
Right.
But they only diminished it in one spot, and yet now they own the entire wall.
Okay, so that's
the chidush.
But it's always the same side.
Right, only. If they diminish the whole thing, then the other side has equal.
Basically, right.
Right, it's not going to be, it's not going to help that.
Isn't the general principle that something, if it's 4 tefachim long, it counts as a permanent kind of thing? Haven't we heard?
Yeah, 4 tefachim is always a measurement, but here they're just trying to say that once you make a change that's 4 tefachim.
Then why not doing it on the bottom?
Because the bottom was talking about making a platform separate from the wall itself.
But you're also changing the elevation of your yard, of your courtyard.
Well, we're going to see. They're going to talk about. Right. But so hold on to that thought, because they're going to talk about a case like that in a second. All right. But up till now, the point is, why should it change the status of their ownership of the entire wall, that they have a step stool. Anybody could have a step stool, or anybody could make a little platform. In other words, the fact that it makes a platform, either that platform should change. It shouldn't matter how long the platform is the point. That's what the Gemara was saying. Why should it matter how long the platform is? If the platform gets you up there, and being closer to the top makes you the owner of the wall, what does it matter whether that platform is 4 tefachim wide or is only 1? Because the point of it is just to get you up to the top. But if you're changing the actual wall, now we understand that it has to be, or if you change the ground, it would be the same thing. If you actually change the ground, maybe then that would be significant. But if it's just a matter of getting you to the top, then it shouldn't be. So taking off the top, literally taking part of the wall off, it has to be a 4 tefach length area that you're lowering. Now, the Gemara says, Rav Yechiel says, Kapat sefel mimaet. If you take a bowl and turn it upside down, this would be like a makeshift stool next to the wall. That also makes it closer to us, because now we can step up on the bowl and get up onto the wall. So therefore, if the people on one chatzer decided to take a big bowl and turn it over on their side, that now they can stand up there. Now they're within 10 tefachim of the top of the wall when they stand on that bowl. So that would also be considered lowering it.
What that thing is, I couldn't figure
That's a bowl.
I couldn't figure out what...
Oh, in the picture? They have a picture of the bowl.
What is that?
It's a bowl.
I thought that was the pit, but I guess not.
Where is it? Oh no, that's the pole. Right, that's the bowl.
It's a bowl.
Okay, now it's a bowl. It's a bowl, yeah. So now he says, "Va'amai davar anital b'shabatu, v'davar anital b'shabat eno mima'et." How could that really be considered augmenting the wall? Because it's something a davar anital b'shabat. It's something that on Shabbat itself you could actually move it. So in what way are you really? You're just, in other words, if I take a little stool from under the one that we have in there, and I just put it next to the wall, I didn't change the whole halachot of the wall. I just put a stool there. It's not fixed in place. Like a platform, at least you actually fix in the ground. But here, it's just a bowl that you turned over. So it says, Lo tzrichad dechabre ba'ara. We're talking about where you actually took that bowl and you inserted it in the ground. In other words, you're permanently affixing to the ground. You put dirt over it to hold it down, or whatever. You twisted it into the dirt. But even if you stick it into the ground, what difference does it make? We learned, we said that if you had an unripe fig that you put under straw, or you have a cake or some kind of a biscuit that you hid it under coals, as long as some of it still sticks out, you can pull it out on Shabbat. In other words, if you have some food that's covered by some muktzeh stuff, as long as the food is protruding, that you can grab it, you can pull it out. So too, if you just because you put some dirt to hold this bowl down in the ground, still the bowl protrudes above the ground. You just take the bowl, so it's still something that's not really a permanent fixture. So we're talking about where this bowl had a rim, and what you did was you didn't just stick it into the ground, but you actually put dirt over the rim, and it's like, you buried it partially. You partially buried it in the ground. So the Gemara says, but still, but that doesn't help either, because we learned in the Mishnah that if a person puts a turnip or radish under a fruit vine, under a grapevine. So bazman shemiktzat alin megulin, if some of the leaves are sticking out, in a choshesh, it's no problem. Lo mishum kilayim, lo mishum maaser, lo mishum sheveit. We're not concerned about kilayim. We're not concerned about diverse seeds being mixed. The fact that you're planting it together with a grapevine, because it's not considered fully planted as long as the leaves are sticking out, and we're not concerned about maaser, meaning to say that if it grows further sitting in there, we're not concerned that maybe it grew more and now you have to take maaser again from this, because we're talking about a vegetable that's already been harvested and you've already taken maaser and now you stuck it in the ground basically to cool it or to preserve it because they didn't have refrigeration. That's why you did it. So we're not concerned, maybe it grew some more and now you have to take maaser again from the extra. We're not concerned about planting during Shemitah, meaning that if you had this vegetable and you wanted to stick it in the ground to cool it and to keep it preserved, you're allowed to do that. We don't say you're planting during Shemitah. V'nitalin b'Shabbat, and you could even pull it out on Shabbat. So you see that something, even if it's really planted in the ground, you can still pull it right out. Okay, so because it's not considered to have taken root. So if that's the case, this bowl certainly is no worse than that. So it's really not a permanent fixture. So the answer is lo tzricha de ba'e marav hatzina. What it means is if you need garden tools, you need a hoe, you need real tools to extract this bowl from the ground. You really stuck it in so deeply that you would need professional tools in order to extract it. There, it's really considered to be augmenting the height of the ground level near the wall, and therefore affecting the status of your wall and making the wall shorter vis-a-vis the people on this chatzah.
In other words, the whole point is that the only time that it can affect the status is that whatever you do, whether it's in the wall or on the floor,
right. It has to be permanent.
It has to be permanent.
Right.
If it's not permanent.
Now, in this case, it doesn't mention anything about it having to be 4 tefachim in length. By the way, in the case of the bowl, in the case of the here it seems like it's just a matter of access. That's what it would seem like. I'm just saying. And whereas when it came to taking off the wall, when you're actually changing the wall, there it has to be 4 tefachim.
That seems a little shaky, because why can't the ball just be there all the time, even if it's not attached?
Well, because it doesn't really. Because then you could say, well, the next door courtyard will take out their tricycle and jump on that. I mean, everyone could do that. Anybody can put something down and get. If I need to change a light bulb, I bring a chair. If I need to change a light bulb, I bring a chair. I put it under the light bulb. That doesn't mean now I'm going to say my ceiling is. My ceiling is low. I just lowered the ceiling because I put a chair.
Is that its designated purpose?
It's actually changed the whole configuration of the place. But I mean, if you just put a chair under a light bulb, you didn't lower the ceiling. Right, you didn't say, "Wow, look, I really elevated the floor." I put the no, but if you actually put something permanent there, or you took something off of the wall, now you could really say it was a game changer. Yeah, for sure. Now we say sulam that a ladder, an Egyptian ladder, doesn't lower the wall. In other words, it won't affect the status of the wall, but one from Suri, a Tyrian wall will, ladder will. So why is that? So what is the nature of this Egyptian ladder? So Amrei Devei Rabbi Yanai, Yeshiva Rabbi Yanai said, Kol she'eno arba'a havakim, any short ladder that has less than 4 rungs. It's a mini ladder. That's the Sulam HaMitzri, so we understand it's too small. So it doesn't really affect. It's not going to affect the status of your wall. If you put it next to the wall, it's something that's moved around too easily. It's a temporary wall. It's a temporary sulam. It's not a sulam. It's not a ladder that's going to be left there permanently.
Also, the issue is it can be moved around.
It's easily movable.
Not that it can actually
it's like
to the top.
Don't you have for Davida? Maybe she's too low, but don't you have for this? For the bathroom sink, the little step this little step thing that you can move around, the plastic thing, like that. Now, so Amar le Rav Achabarei de Rava Rav Ashi. So Rav Achabarei the Rava said to Rav Ashi, what's the reason why it doesn't diminish if you put this little, even though it's a little sulam, it's a little ladder? Why can't we say maybe it brings a person, it brings us closer to the top of the wall, because you don't have to climb up the full 10 tefachim of the wall. You can go up the ladder, even if the ladder's short. Now you can jump from there. You're much closer. So he said, they said to him, Lo shemi alachada amar Rav Acha bar Ada amar Rav Hamnuna amar Rav. Did you not hear what Rav Acha bar Ada said, that Rav Hamnuna said, that Rav said, Mishum dahavale davar shenital b'Shabbat, v'chol davar shenital b'Shabbat eno mima'ed, because it's something that's movable on Shabbat, and anything that's easily movable on Shabbat, in other words, it's not muktzeh, so it's not halachically prohibited to move it on Shabbat, so therefore it's no problem. Therefore it doesn't add to the wall because it's nital b'Shabbat, right? So it is a problem, meaning it doesn't affect the situation because it's not permanent. We can't even say it's permanent for Shabbat, because even on Shabbat you're going to move the ladder. He says, but if that's the case, well, a big ladder is also not muktzeh. Whoever said a ladder was muktzeh? You can't use a ladder on Shabbat. Who said? If you need to get some people to get to their attic, they need a ladder. There's no problem going up. So hatam kovdo kove'o. There, it's so heavy that, as Rashi says, umitoch shu kaved, because it's heavy. En notlin oto misham velo mishum isur. It's not a matter of Isurei Shabbat. In other words, he thought that what he meant was Muktzeh. Oh, a small ladder is not Muktzeh, so therefore you're going to move it. No. It's not a matter of size because of halacha. It's a matter of convenience. In other words, if you have a big ladder, how often are you going to move the big ladder? You're going to leave it there. You're not going to, every time somebody needs it, you're going to move the ladder again. But a small ladder, a step ladder, we would call it, like a step ladder, you move it around all the time. So therefore, a small ladder that you move around all the time is we're not going to say it affects the configuration of the ground vis-a-vis the wall. But a big ladder that's heavy, people don't typically move it. If it's in a place, it's going to stay there, maybe not permanently, maybe not forever and ever, but it's going to stay there for the foreseeable future. It's not going to be moved around willy-nilly, you would say. So, now the Gemara says, so now he says, Amar Abaye, Abaye says, you have a wall separating two courtyards, and it's 10 tefachim tall. Sulam rachav arba'a mikan, vesulam rachav arba'a mikan, ve'en ben zel hazeh shlosha tefachim mima'et. Shelosha eno mima'et. Now, what happens if on both sides, in other words, you've got what was the Montagues and the Capulets, or whoever, they live on two sides of the same courtyard, that wall, the wall, and so one side puts a ladder that's next to the wall, and this ladder is 4 tefachim in length, and it's whatever height, and they put it on their side of the wall, and then the people on the other side of the courtyard say, hey, well, if you're going to do that, we're going to do that, and they go and they also lower the courtyard on their side by putting the ladder there. Okay, so now and if you were to look at the wall from the side, you would see that the place, let's say, where the people on the left side of the courtyard, you're looking now from the side, so you see one courtyard on your left and one on your right. You're standing in front of the wall, right? So you would see that you could see both courtyards. Let's say you took a bird's eye view. You could see both courtyards. So you would see that where the people in courtyard A put their ladder and where the people in courtyard B put their ladder is right next to it. Is in the same spot, but on the opposite sides of the wall. Or within 3 tefachim of one another. They're not far away. It's not like one, right? Which is considered the same spot. So then, what are they basically doing? They basically made a staircase that you walk up the wall on one side, you go onto the top of the wall, and you walk down to the other side. So what did they do? They made a way for the two chatzerot to merge. So it's actually a happy ending. In other words, it's not that now we say that nobody can use the wall because they both own it. It's on the contrary. We say that now everybody can because now the two chatzerot can join because there's a staircase on one. You go up on one side, you get to the top of the wall, and you descend on the other side. It's beautiful. But if there's more than 3 tefachim separating, if there's 3 or more tefachim to be exact, if there's 3 or more tefachim separating where the people in courtyard A put their ladder and where people in courtyard B put their ladder, we can no longer see them as one thing anymore. We can no longer see them as uniting the chatzerot. One is for the convenience of one courtyard, one is for the convenience of the other courtyard. They don't connect. But where they connect, it actually empowers the two courtyards to combine, which is a nice thing. Now, the Gemara goes on and says, V'lo amaran, and we only say this, Ela de la have kotel arba'ah. That's only where the wall was not 4 tefachim in width. Aval have kotel arba'a, afilu muflag tuvanan. And you know what? We'll go even further. That even if, let's say, the people in courtyard A put their ladder against the wall, and the people in courtyard B put their ladder against the wall, and these ladders are not commensurate, they don't line up. There's 3 tefachim or more between their spots. Okay? It doesn't matter if the wall itself is 4 tefachim in thickness. Why doesn't it matter? Because if you're in courtyard A, you can walk up the ladder on your side. You go onto the top of the wall, and the wall is 4 tefachim in thickness, so it's like a walkway. You can walk on it. You walk over to where the ladder is for courtyard B, and you go down. No problem. It's like having a landing in a staircase. It will be like the landing of the staircase. Okay, so it's not a problem then. So only where the wall is thin do the two ladders have to be in the same spot or within 3 tefachim of one another.
Because you're not likely to walk on it.
Because you're not going to actually walk on the wall, along the wall. You're just going to jump over it. But where the wall is thick and you could actually walk along it, so then even if they're not in the same spot, we can say now the 2 courtyards are connected. So if these 2 courtyards wanted to connect, that's what they could do. They could put a small ladder on one side, a small ladder on the other side. It's 4 tefachim in length. And they could say, okay, now we have access to one another's courtyards by traversing this wall. So the Gemara goes on. So Amar Rav Bevai bar Abaye. Rav Bevai bar Abaye said, Bana itztaba al gabe itztaba. A person built some kind of a platform on top of another platform. Okay? Im yesh beitztaba tachtona arba'a mima'et. If the bottom itztaba has 4 tefachim in its length, then it will diminish the height of the ground relative to the wall. Inami, alternatively, ein batachtona arba'a. Or if the lower platform doesn't have a length of 4 tefachim, v'yesh b'elyona arba'a, but the top one does, ve'en ben ze lazeh shelosha mima'et. And there's no space, and there's not more than a space of 3 tefachim between the two. In other words, the way it works is like this. We have to view it that there's something which is 4 tefachim in length along the wall in order to consider the wall diminished, or the height of the wall diminished.
Wait, what's
okay?
the length? You
It's the width of the ladder. It's the width of the ladder, right?
I would call it the width of the ladder. Yeah. So width of the ladder. But right. But in the case of the platform is rectangular, so I'm thinking of it as a length, right? So in that case, so if the length of the platform is 4 tefachim, and of the bottom platform, even if the top platform is narrow, it doesn't matter because the bottom platform is 4 tefachim. And if the bottom platform is very narrow, okay, but the top one is wide, but there's no space between the top and the bottom, what we're envisioning here, the way it's described in the Rishonim, is that you had some kind of a structure, and then on top of it, you built a structure that had legs on top of the first structure, so there's space in between them. There's space in between them. I think that they show a picture.
Right.
Yeah. So there's space in between them. So see, the top one is where the lower one. This is number. What number is it? 256. So in that one you have where there's 4 tefachim in the lower one, and there's not. So therefore it doesn't matter how much space there is between the lower one and the upper one, right? But in the case where the lower one might be narrow, it's less than 4 tefachim, but the top of the platform, the top of the structure, whatever it is 4 tefachim, and the space, the airspace in between the two pieces is less than 3. So it's no problem, because the point is that whatever is going to be 4 tefachim, just to put it in a principle sense, whatever is going to be 4 tefachim in length has to be connected to the ground. A mid-air floating 4 tefach thing is not going to count. So either the bottom piece has to be 4 tefachim in length, or the top piece that's 4 tefachim in length cannot have 3 tefachim in space between itself and the thing that's on the bottom. So even though the thing that's on the bottom is narrower, the thing that's on the top is considered mechubar. It's considered connected to the ground through the piece under it, because there's not...
That might disqualify the ladder. Is that what they're trying to do?
No, they're not disqualifying. They're expanding this further.
Because that's how the ladder is.
No, because the rungs of the ladder are close to one another. The rungs of the ladder are not going to be 3 tefachim apart.
Okay, yeah. All right, okay.
A ladder might go like
That's why I could have mentioned that before, but yeah, that's the assumption is that the
ladder is considered.
That's the next case actually. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua. Rav Nachman said that Rabba Baravua said that sulam sheshelivotav porachot. If you have a ladder that rather than being like a sort of step ladder, it's actually a ladder that has airspace in between the rungs, right? Like a normal ladder, like a typical ladder. So it says in that case that im yesh b'shliva tachtona arba'a mima'et, that if the bottom rung is 4 tefachim in length, that's when it's going to diminish the wall. Or if the top rung has 4 tefachim in length, even though the bottom of the ladder is narrower, but you never have an airspace of 3 between the rungs. So still we say mima'et, that it will work as long as either the bottom part is 4 tefachim in length, or the top part is, and there's never a space of 3 tefachim in between the top part that's 4 tefachim in length and the bottom. There's never a break of 3 tefachim anywhere in the airspace of that thing, so it's considered to be connected to the ground, and it's 4 tefachim in length, and you're good. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, and Rav Nachman said that Rabba Baravua said, Ziz hayotze min hakotel, a protrusion that comes out of the wall, daled al daled, which is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. In other words, it's like a board sticking out, okay, of the wall. So it's 4 tefachim in width and length. V'yinyach alav sulam, and you lean a ladder against it. Okay, kol shehu, it could be kol shehu, meaning even if it's a very, very thin ladder, mi'ato, it will still diminish it. In other words, that ladder itself, if it had been against the wall, wouldn't have been wide enough. because the ladder itself is not 4 tefachim long, but it's leaning against this board protruding from the wall, which is 4 tefachim long, so it connects with that. And what does the ladder end up doing? The ladder makes the protrusion fused with the ground. Okay? Is that the one?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the case. Yeah. So it's fusing that protrusion with the ground. I don't think that's the case yet. Not that one. That's too complicated. That's too complicated. Yeah. So velo amaran eladotve ale, and that's only true if he leans it against the protrusion. Aval otve bahade. Arvache. So he says if the person arvache aroche. So he says that what you end up doing is that if you lean it, in other words, you lean the head of the ladder against the protrusion, then you're really actually extending the protrusion and making it connected with the ground. But if you put it next to it, okay, Viroshon nismach lakotel, that really it's not leaning on the protrusion, but the ladder leans against the wall. So then, what are you really doing? All you're really doing is you're adding thickness, or you're adding a piece or length to the protrusion, but you're not connecting the protrusion to the ground. Let's look at the picture. So I think there's a picture of this one. To what is it?
259 and 216.
Okay, 259. Right. So this is where it's actually connected. It's really just 259 first, right? So 259 really. It's connected. Where it's connected, it's actually connecting the protrusion to the ground. But here, if it's next to it, what are you really doing? Just adding a little bit of extension to the protrusion. But it's not, since it's basically flush with the wall, the ladder in that case. It's leaning against the wall. And the ladder itself doesn't have the requisite length, or width, actually, you wanted to call it. It doesn't have the requisite width to justify being considered an addition to the wall, or to be considered a platform, let's say, to change the status of the wall. And it's right next to the protrusion, so all it's doing is adding some length to the protrusion, but it's not connecting the protrusion to the wall. And what we need to do is we need to connect the protrusion to the ground. Okay, So that and that's, I think, the best place to stop for now, because we're going to get into more complicated cases and we're going to go too far into the daf, into the next daf Ein Chet. So this is where we'll stop.